1989 was a pivotal year. It saw the fall of the Berlin Wall and the Nobel Peace Prize awarded to Mikhail Gorbachev. Margaret Thatcher's time as Prime Minister came to an end, and Tim Berners-Lee's created the first version of the World Wide Web. Remains of the Day was published, and Vogue by Madonna hit the charts. Meanwhile, it was also a pivotal moment in my own life, for I decided to become a teacher. Housed in an austere concrete edifice in Bloomsbury, I signed up at the Institute of Education and started my journey to become a history teacher. The teaching practice was particularly memorable as I explained the gory details of living conditions in the Industrial Revolution. One moment I experienced the highs of sparkling eyes and connection. The next moment, the deflation of disengagement, boredom, and a metaphorical rolling of eyes. It was a powerful, if sometimes painful, experience. The university part was more abstract, learning about the recently introduced national curriculum and its underpinnings, and academic theories on the acquisition of knowledge and skills. I yearned for something more inspiring. One day, I found it in an elective seminar. The room was small, with grey carpets, magnolia walls, and concrete windows which did not open, but out of which you could glimpse the treetops in Russell Square. The furniture was institutional, with a dusty blackboard at the front and an aircon that hummed a little too loudly. I think it would be fair to say it was not a popular elective. There were 4 of us in the room, one of whom appeared to have misread the brief. At the front was the lecturer, an energetic, grey-haired man with a green tweed jacket, white shirt, brown cords, and DM boots. He had a certain charisma, for he was the head of a progressive school in the southwest of England, and this was a 6-seminar programme on progressive education. Some weeks I was the only one who showed up, and we talked at length about the possibilities of what education could be. When I grow up, I said to myself, this is what I want to be. Various experiences had led me to this point. I was, at that time, pretty idealistic and committed to making the world a better place. The route I decided was not politics or law or journalism, but the shaping of minds of future generations. My own education had been academically rigorous, but emotionally and creatively stifling. Along the way, though, I had experienced some, perhaps inadvertent, inspiring moments, which did give me a notion of what schools could really be like. And I always loved being part of a community, helping to shape and organise things, a quality passed down the generations in my family. Fired up, I went into my first job. It had its highs and lows, but I felt at home. I wanted to be good at it, so I worked hard, planning, marking, organising trips, working with colleagues. And imperceptibly, I became part of the system. Rather than thinking about changing the world, I thought about my Year 10 lesson on the Great Depression and about the ever-memorable girl in Year 8 who seemed to take great pleasure in defying me. Instead of nurturing a love of learning, I thought about mock exams and percentages of passes. Instead of progressive education, I thought about lunch duty, the seemingly nonsensical decisions of management, and how many weeks to the holidays. Almost a decade later, in 2000, aged 33, I became deputy head in a big, unwieldy, comprehensive school in East London. When I landed there, it felt like another planet. Very high levels of need, huge behaviour problems, an anti-learning culture. In the early months, at the end of each day, I would carefully record each of the interactions I had had, how many times someone had ignored me, walked away, used offensive language. It was highly challenging. But I was also fortunate to work with great people and to coincide with a time of genuine creativity and progress in schools. These were the early New Labour years, when funding was channelled to schools serving underserved communities, and there was a shared optimism about the power of education to transform young people's lives. This was Tony Blair's era of education, education, education. It was also a time when we were enthused by the ideas of Ken Robinson, whose videos on creativity and learning we ingested in staff meetings. For the first time since those seminars at the Institute, I re-engaged with the big ideas. And not only engaged with them, but put them into practice and saw the results. Behaviour transformed, culture transformed, results transformed. We created multidisciplinary projects, bringing science and arts together with support from industry professionals and university academics. We championed the performing arts, with drama and dance becoming signature subjects in the school. By the time I left, where once there had been chaos, we had pupils performing their own spoken word poetry to spellbound audiences of over 1,000 pupils. So I took this spirit into my new job as head in a school near Heathrow. But by the late 2000s, one could sense the beginning of change. Ed Balls became the education minister in 2000, and to my mind, he was the inflection point where the balance tilted from the human to the data. With his background as an economist, it was with him that statistical outputs began to be used in a different way, not for understanding and supporting improvement, but to reward the successful and sanction the failures, seemingly unaware that these standards themselves were almost entirely arbitrary constructs. Little did we know, however, this was merely the calm before the storm. The change in government in 2010 brought in Michael Gove and Nick Gibb, Dominic Cummings and Michael Wilshaw, and the approach of Ed Balls was put on steroids. Remarkably quickly, the world transitioned. Changes were made to GCSEs to make them much more like old O-levels. They did at one point consider changing the name back to O-levels. With huge increases in content, the end of coursework in many subjects, and all determined by long end of course written exams. Whatever the pupil population and context, crude analysis of these exam results was then used to determine if a school was successful or not. If a school in an inner city area was performing less well than its suburban middle class equivalent, this could only be to do with, I quote, the poverty of low expectations. And anyone who argued against this was dismissed in a phrase coined by that towering intellect of Toby Young as the blob. This was accompanied by the beefing up of Ofsted into a heavy-handed accountability machine lacking nuance and professional judgment. Studies showed that Ofsted grades became over 99% correlated to raw exam outcomes, ignoring the impact of a myriad of well-established contextual factors on how pupils attain. And finally, academization. This meant if your pupils did not do well with these new O-level style exams, then you would get a poor Ofsted rating, which would likely lead literally to the end of your school. All around me, schools that had worked hard to serve their communities for decades disappeared from the face of the map. While some elements of these changes had nuggets of potential merit, they were introduced with a breathtaking arrogance that dismissed the views and experience of those on the ground and which made them ultimately a destructive force. The impact as ahead was to seek survival. And to survive, we were incentivized to engage in all the wrong behaviors, excluding young people who might damage the exam stats, refusing to take pupils with more challenging profiles, even if they were good for students, getting rid of courses which did not count in the league tables, even if they were poor educationally, introducing courses that did. Top-down management practices that puts unsustainable pressure on staff, and top-down teaching practices that put unsustainable pressure on young people. One day, I remember sitting with colleagues in my office with the Year 11 spreadsheets laid out in front of us. We know these students are making great progress, but we need to get those who are currently on a D in maths to a C. Otherwise, with Ofsted around the corner, we could be in trouble. Okay, we thought, let's pull this one out of music. Let's pull this one out of art and this one out of PE and give them some extra targeted maths. Let's find the funding by pulling the money from the performing arts workshops we were going to run and put it into some extra maths teaching. It all made perfect sense. But that night, I got home and poured myself a large glass of red wine. This is not why I came into teaching, I said to my wife. I felt like a functionary in a system over which I had no control. I knew I had to get back to what had inspired me into the profession in the first place. And that, as they say, is how I ended up at CAS. When I step back and review the work we've done here over the last decade, it is a little like looking at an aerial photograph of a river system such as the Amazon, with many streams flowing into the main river. The starting stream was vision. What do we stand for? Why are we here? What are we seeking to achieve? In theory, this should be simple, but it took some time to articulate. The thinking was drawn from our past and our present, our founders, our current community, and various people who had sought to capture it along the way. Our staff and parents, our council members and pupils, external organisations and educational thinkers all contributed. A key moment for me was defining this in the deeper learning wheel. I have tucked away in one of my OneDrive folders a PowerPoint, which shows the many iterations before we landed on the version we have today. The wheel articulated a mental model for what our pupils should achieve and what would enable them to be successful at school and beyond. Once we had that under our belt, it became easier to chart the way forward. Alongside this vision, I then see the second stream, and that is culture. This has its own three tributaries. First, being human-centred, seeing children and young people, staff and families as individuals, not data points. Second, we commit to giving everyone agency within sensible guidelines and guardrails. We are a place for empowerment, not control. And third, we are open and reflective. We understand that people and institutions are fundamentally human and do not get everything right all of the time. We all need to listen, reflect, and evolve. And rather than being a sign of weakness, this is a sign of strength. The third stream, alongside the vision and the culture, is strategy. We do not want to be an institution that says one thing and then does another. So there have been multitudes of projects to take this forward, some high profile, such as student learning conferences and the village, explorations and SDCs, and others which are more under the bonnet, such as the use of data and behaviour systems, professional development and budget management. Guided by the vision, fueled by the culture, these are the things that make a day-to-day difference on the ground. And lastly, my bird's eye view shows me the fourth stream, which is refinement. What does the data, qualitative and quantitative, tell us about quality? Are the initiatives we have introduced delivering what we had hoped, and how can they further be developed? And together, these four streams converge into the river that is CAS today. It is true that sometimes we hit the occasional rapids, but for the most part, it flows with power and purpose. I witness this in the journey our children take as they progress through the school and blossom into the young adults who go out into the world. I see this in the transformative power of CAS when people join from other places and regain their sense of confidence, self-belief and agency. And I see it when I walk around the school, observing the relationships between teachers and pupils, the visceral creativity and the authentic deeper learning. None of this can happen without a team of amazing people supporting each step of the way. This starts with my colleagues, who are an incredible collection of committed professionals seeking to do good for our community and for the world. Whilst I am supremely grateful to all of my colleagues, there are a few who would be remiss not to mention. Much has been driven by the people in the senior team, almost all of whom are here tonight, past and present. I've worked with senior teams in schools for over 25 years, and by some distance, this has been the most energizing and enjoyable, and the smartest. I could not have hoped to have worked with a better group of people. Alongside this, I've had tremendous backing from all the support staff in the school. Whilst I want to thank them all, there is one person who has to have a special mention. I have been her 5th head teacher, and her connection to the school and the community is truly unique. I speak, of course, of Pam. I am also very grateful for the partnership I have experienced with Council. The 3 chairs, Vaughan, Annabelle and Sam, the chairs of the committees, and all the members over the last 11 years. I do have a special mention for those who have been alongside for the whole journey: Nick, Sarah, Fiona, Philip and Cara. Taking on this responsibility is a significant commitment and has not always been straightforward, and is an admirable example of the contribution strand in our deeper learning wheel. I also want to say thank you to our parents and families. CAS was set up by 7 parents, as we know, back in 1898, and this created a special identity for the school. I have welcomed and enjoyed my parent interactions and learnt much from them. I am convinced we have by far the most interesting bunch of parents in any school in North London, probably England, if not the world. And finally, I want to thank the pupils. It has been a privilege over 35 years to work with young people, and especially over the last 11 years at CAS. They never cease to be curious, energetic, funny and fun. They give you insights you never expected. They have kept my spirit young. So when I look back over my 11 years at CAS, what are my closing thoughts? Well, I feel very fortunate to have been blown by the winds of fate, to have landed at our little oasis off the North End Road. It can be helpful to believe that all things happen for a reason, so perhaps that is why Gove was made Education Minister back in 2010. Coming here allowed me to reconnect with my original motivations for becoming an educator that I discussed in that little room with that head teacher back in 1990. My idealism, the idea that education can be a holistic, transformative experience and have a positive impact on the world. It has enabled me to shape a place that, rather fitting people into boxes, allows them to be themselves. A place where all qualities are valued and which is ambitious for every individual on their own terms. A place that feels like a community where people look after each other, and a place that allows agency and innovation and is not afraid to step away from the norm. At times, this has come with challenges. It is not always easy being a pioneer and having to explain and justify one's approach. Sometimes it takes time to get quality right with innovation, and the scrutiny can be fierce. And on rare occasions, working in a relationship-based way with pupils, staff, and parents has its limitations. However, has it been worth it? Absolutely. I could always see how Kaz brought out the best in children. Over time, I began to see how Kaz brought out the best in staff. More recently, I have seen how it brought out the best in me. It has made me a better head teacher and a wiser, more fulfilled person. And for that, I am truly grateful. Kaz is something very special. Special for those in our community and special for those beyond, as it proudly demonstrates what education can be: academically successful and committed to well-being, ambitious and holistic. It does not have to be a choice. I am proud to have played my part and wish you, the whole community and the school every success in the future. Thank you.